issues, of course, the lines are open. If you have a question about yourself with breathing difficulties and need for oxygenation, if you yourself have had coronavirus, or you have a loved one in the hospital, you have a question about how they can be managed best with breathing exercises, what should you be doing to improve your lung function? Perhaps you don't have COVID, perhaps you don't have lung disease. Is there something you can do as well? If you have a question, give us a call. 1-877-NYU-DOCS. It's 1-877-698-3627. You can also email us, docs@SiriusXM.com. But as I said, the lines are open, 1-877-698-3627. So Greg, I think it's really important that we understand how you're helping people now. They're off the ventilator. We also understand people with disabilities, and there's many people with disabilities, things that affect the strength of the breathing muscles. It could be from a previous spinal cord injury, or sometimes a stroke and limitation of movement, motor neuron disease, multiple sclerosis. There are many, many people out there with lots of different reasons for weakness of the breathing muscles. Some people with curves in their spine, a scoliosis or a kyphosis. So it's really very key that we help people understand what they can be doing to strengthen their lungs and to do breathing exercises. So let's talk about that for a little bit. Talk to us, what are some of the basic breathing exercises that people can do in order to expand their lungs and strengthen their lung muscles?
Yeah, I think this is a really good point. I think just to take one step back, I think you're so right in terms of what we really need to do, especially for our patients or individuals with perhaps some disability or what we call comorbid conditions. Really the key here is prevention, and we really need to make strong efforts to try and mitigate or minimize our risk of exposure to COVID-19. So I think you highlighted that just a second ago, and I think that really, really is important to emphasize. Do everything we can to minimize the exposure. I think once we take that into account and follow all the guidelines that I think many of you have heard about, then there is a subgroup of patients that potentially, if exposed, are at higher risk for having increased severity associated with this COVID-19 virus. And you mentioned that this group that you described essentially has an impairment in their ability to move air through their lungs. Their lung function is diminished. And that in itself creates a problem or a challenge. So if you were exposed to really any virus in other common colds or flus, the challenge is that with this decreased lung function, you lose a little bit of what we call your pulmonary reserve. And so, if I could use an analogy here, you want your lungs functioning at 100%. And if they're not, if they're functioning at a smaller percentage of that, it just makes it that much more difficult to fight off this infection, specifically in this case COVID-19, which attacks the lungs. So if you have a decreased lung function, you have a little bit more of a challenge in compensating for the virus attacking the lungs. You also have a decreased strength in terms of a cough. And thankfully with COVID-19, the majority of cases are dry cough, and we're seeing that in 70+% of the patients really don't have a productive cough. But in those that do have a productive cough, where they need to mobilize secretions and clean out those lungs, there is challenges with individuals that have a decreased lung function or strength of their cough. And so we want to try and emphasize and maximize what we can do to keep those lungs as clean as possible. We call our pulmonary hygiene techniques. And I like to use this idea of recycling. Every time you take a breath, you're recycling that air. And you need to do that. You don't want to have any of these potential potential, in things that we inhale, these pathogens or bacteria or irritants that potentially can be inhaled into the lungs. And so just by moving air through the lungs, we can help recycle that air and keep them as clean as possible. So a long-winded answer for your question is breathing exercises is really one of the best ways to maintain and keep the lungs as clean as possible. So moving air in and out of the lungs, trying to ensure that we keep that air clean.
Yeah, no doubt about it. The breathing exercises are really, really key. Coughing exercises as well, and there are techniques for coughing exercises too. Greg, we're going to go to the lines. We have a caller from Georgia who's going to join us now, and it's Mildred. Mildred, welcome to the show. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
We're good, thank you, Mildred. How are you doing?
Doing good, thank you.
Good. You had a question for us?
I did. This may not be appropriate, but I know you said the cold is the key to be may have a question about something. I've had bronchitis twice this year. I've not had COVID. But I always, sometimes I find that my breathing would just be hard. Like it would be hard just to breathe for a couple seconds, and I'd have to take a deep breath. So my question really is, how would I avoid having lung issues with experiencing this, and especially having bronchitis twice, and then constant drainage, like sinus drainage? Is that even something I'm concerned about?
So great question, Mildred. And number one, if anyone's having difficulty with breathing, they should call their doctor. I'm just realizing, and I read your name incorrectly. Forgive me, it's Matilda. Is that right?
I didn't want to be impolite and correct you, but it's
No, you must be. I'm being impolite. It's Matilda, and forgive me. I read incorrectly, so my apologies. That's what happens on live shows. Sometimes we goof up, so my bad. Matilda, thank you for being so understanding. It happens. So it is important for anyone with breathing difficulties, for sure, discuss this with your primary care doctor. But you bring up a great point, and Greg, I want you to address this. We just have a few minutes left in the show, but address this. What are some of the exercises that Matilda can do in order to breathe deeply, to protect the lungs, to cough, to clear out that mucus that she's experiencing?
Yes, Matilda, thank you for calling. Great question. So, quickly to look at, bronchitis comes in two different, forms. It comes in an acute form where, it's early on and kind of recovers, and then there's more of a chronic form. And it sounds like maybe you have a little bit of a chronic form, being the fact that you've had this now twice over the last year. So what that means is you have some inflammation or some, irritation within your main airways, similar to COVID-19, which is an irritation or inflammation of the distal airways, the alveoli, the small little air sacs that exchange air. So in these cases, essentially what we want to do is try and move that air through the lungs. So some examples of breathing exercises would be what we call pursed lip breathing. So, breathing in through the nose and out through the mouth, trying to move air in sequentially. In for a count of 2, out for a count of 4, some combination of that. We have diaphragmatic breathing, which emphasizes the primary respiratory muscle, which is the diaphragm, which helps to move air through the lungs really most efficiently and effectively. All of these techniques you'd want to pace with activity, so coordinate with activity. One of the best things, and I know Dr. Whiteson emphasizes this quite a bit on the show, but exercise is medicine, and in this case, with the lungs, it's no exception. Mobility is really our best form of chest BT, so just getting up and exercises really moves air through the lungs effectively. So you've all experienced this, but when you get up, you walk, you do a little exercise, you find yourself taking deeper breaths, more rapid breaths, and that is really, really important in terms of recycling that air and making sure that we keep them clean. In terms of secretion clearance, I think, yes, in your case, there probably is a little bit of secretion, so there's different techniques that we can use to help us cough and move air through the lungs. And so an effective cough is really important to mobilize and get rid of these secretions. So if you find that you don't have strength with your cough, there's different techniques, things like air stacking or assisted coughs or using devices